All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Martha Alter Hines, and today I am talking with Chris Skidmore again. Um, so I think most of you are pretty familiar with Chris. We've done lots and lots of talks together, and we've done lots of talks with Melanie Reinhardt, the three of us. And I feel like I even want to just presence Melanie, because the topic we're going to be talking about today is Jupiter and Gemini. And if anyone should be here, it should actually be Melanie too. So we're
That's
honoring
true.
you, Melanie. Yeah. And but I'm really excited to be having this conversation with you, Chris. Thank you so much. Um, and I think just to start out, the thing we were both when we were dropping in before we were starting to record that felt really right about why we're doing this video is essentially to bring honoring to Jupiter, to bring honoring to Gemini, maybe actually also to bring honoring to Mercury, and therefore to ourselves and to life. And um yeah, to just to explore and have a dialogue with each other and with all of you watching and listening in a way that perhaps opens things up um on levels that we haven't explored before, or in new ways, to bring more and more honoring all the way around. Does that feel accurate for you?
Yeah, that feels accurate. And I think what we were saying is, I think probably the experience of a lot of astrologers or students of astrology when learning about Jupiter is like, it's expansive.
It expands things. It makes
So you're
stuff
like,
bigger.
well, what does
Yeah.
it mean in my chart? Like if I just look at my Jupiter, and I tend to have found that like, no, I have to look at Jupiter in terms of it and something else because it's amplifying or expanding something else. So I'm like, well, what? So this is the god of the gods, this is
Mm.
Zeus. This is Zeus consciousness has been somehow over the millennia, drifted down to this one. It expands, and it's so
Yeah.
inadequate. It's just not enough, So I found myself really just a few years ago really pondering, what actually is it. I had a conversation with Jason Holly about it. We talked about it on the podcast. He's gone and done some really good things about it too. So Astro University, there's some really good stuff that Jason Holly has. Um, but I think it's just kind of one of those things where we got to get back to the symbol and see if we can, like let it speak. And so that's what Martha and I were talking about before we got on. Like, can we let Jupiter come through and have its own identity, not just kind of like attached to something else that it amplifies.
Mm.
So, I think that's the goal, isn't it? That's what we're aiming at.
Yeah. And you mentioned before we started recording that you want to start actually with the mythology around Echo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want to start with Echo because um as we were preparing, Martha's just like she used the word echo and it just bounced out at me, the word echo and the myth of echo. Um it just bounced into my arena. I saw that you were just frozen there. Was I frozen? Or was I good?
No, we're all, yes, but we're all good. Hang on one
Okay,
second.
I'm back. Yeah, we're back.
Yes, we are.
So Martha and I just had a series of technical difficulties. And as you disappeared, Martha, off the screen and was dealing with internet guards, my phone just like suddenly came alive over there, which is on Do Not Disturb, and it said, try Gemini. That's what it
What?
said to me. It said, try Gemini. I have an Android phone and there's a Gemini program, I think that they've just released or something, and it wants
Huh.
me to try Gemini. And I'm like, it says, how can we help you? And then above it, it said, try Gemini. It's
Wow.
like interesting, which I felt might be a bit of a nod from the gods that we might be in for Jupiter and Gemini being like a Mercury retrograde year,
Mm. Mm, 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 mm. Yeah.
like a year of it,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah.
The amplification of the trickster in massive, massive forms.
Mm.
So it makes me kind of think, like with your internet going down and everything happening here, like this sort of like fuzzing out, and then my phone deciding to do that. Um, Worth bringing that in.
For
So
whatever that's
try
worth. Yeah.
try Gemini, everybody. Try Gemini this year.
Well, it's true. And we'll get into this more, but I was saying even before we started recording, Gemini is the one sign out of all 12 that I am the least familiar with and the least comfortable with. And so anyway, that's part of why I wanted to have this conversation with you, is because I would like to try Gemini some new ways. And here we are. Okay, so keep going.
So the reason Echo came up is that I think at the start of our chat you said you wanted to echo something, and then because the word echo popped out so strongly. And then I thought about echoing in mythology. I was like, oh, such a great character, and actually very Gemini. So
Mm.
to give you, it's a little snippet in a way. It gives us like a little vignette or a little symbol to ponder in our chat today. So Echo was a nymph, a wood nymph, or was. Um, and one day Zeus was coming down from his throne, coming into the woods and just wanting to have a grand old time. So he wanted to go and spend some time in the springs with the nymphs. Um, and so he was there enjoying his time with the nymphs, obviously not in his throne Zeus self at this point, not in his king husband Zeus, definitely not the Zeus that you would find in the 1997 movie Hercules, where Zeus is a very loving, fatherly, very devoted to Hera, and that's the image that we get of this Zeus figure. And all of the other gods are kind of his angels. So if you ever want to see the Christian overlay in full effect, go back to 1997 Disney, and you'll get the Christian overlay over Greek mythology in about as pure a form as I've ever seen it. I don't know if pure is the right word, or obvious form,
Mm.
because you basically have God, son of God, devil,
Mm.
which is quite remarkable because that was not at all what the Greeks saw. So that it really is this overlay of that model onto Greek mythology. Anyway, Zeus is spending time in the spring with the nymphs, enjoying himself. You can imagine what he's up to. It's a lot of pleasure, a lot of fun, and he's just having a grand old time down there, enjoying creation, enjoying creating and creating, and generativeness and generosity and all of this kind of thing. And then there's this kind of feeling that Hera is here, right? It's like, uh-oh, Hera, wife of Zeus, has arrived onto the scene. And so all the nymphs are like, what do we do? What do we do? And Echo is the most chatty of all of the nymphs. Very chatty, million things to say about a million different things. So she really is the archetypal Gemini.
Mm.
And so they send Echo out to talk to Hera. And Echo goes out to Hera to meet her. And it goes like, Hera, oh my God, it's so good to see you, to see a goddess of this kind of part. Like, what are you even doing down here? What an honor. Your hair looks great today. Have you done something different? Because last time I saw your hair, it was like this, but this time I see it, it's like this. So have you? And Hera just gets drawn in and she starts talking like, oh yeah, well, actually, I've changed my hairstylist. And she's like, oh, it's amazing. I really love what you've done. What about this dress? This is a beautiful dress. Like, you're always looking great. You're always looking, beautiful and voluptuous and sexy. But this one, I mean, like, where have you gone? It's just like, well, I went shopping at this different place, and like there's these different seamstresses. So Harry gets drawn in to this conversation, and it's very enlivening and chatty, and like drawing her forward and drawing her into all these different things. Just when she's kind of like off on one train, switch trains, then she starts talking about something else. And it goes for like half an hour of just chat, 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 until Hera's like, wait a second. She's like, she snaps out. She's like, wait, I came here to do this. Oh, it's Zeus. That's right. Okay. And she goes into the forest, look around, and there's nothing there, no Zeus, no signs of anything, a few nymphs just like hanging out. No one's really doing anything. nothing's happening here, nothing to look at, nothing to see here, kind of thing. But then, of course, it's Hera, and Hera is never ever fooled, never ever fooled, right? So she's always one step ahead of the game, given that she's the mother goddess, right? She's one of the original Earth mother goddesses. She's never going to be fooled by too much. She can be kind of like motioned off, but then she'll come back to what she knows, right? So she comes back to Echo and she looks at her and says, "You did this. You did this to me."
Wow.
And she's very, very upset. She's wrathful, as goddesses are and gods are, when they feel like they've been duped or tricked. And she was tricked. She was tricked into this conversation. She was tricked into these distractions. She was tricked into moving left and right, up and down, all around the different things. It was the archetypal trickster was at play, and she doesn't appreciate that trickery. And so she says, "Well, yeah, your voice is your strength, is it? Well, now, gone. And now all you can do is repeat back the words someone else says." So essentially, she's taken from Echo everything that makes Echo Echo, right? Everything that makes her, her gift of the gab, her way with words, her, expressions, her liveliness, her ability to be in the flow of things with information, her fast mind, and all of that is taken because now she has no voice, or she does still have a voice, but her voice becomes only that echoes, only the echoing back of someone else's sentiment and what someone else said. So the echo complex is a very interesting one. And, I'm sure we've all either felt it within ourselves or have experienced it in the world or experienced it in friends and whoever else, like where the loss of your voice is like the loss of your sovereignty, the loss of your ability to speak things through. And sometimes you may have like a temporary echo crisis where you've lost your words. Words become sort of too dangerous in the way that, for Echo, they were used, and it was seen as that she was doing something against Hera, which she was, I guess. So we kind of lose them, or they go into the ocean, or they get sort of taken from us, or words get maybe used against us, or our words getting used against us. These kinds of things I put into this big realm that I've sort of named the echo complex. And then what happens to Echo is that as she's wandering around without a voice, without a voice of her own, she runs into Narcissus. And she falls madly in love with him on first sight. And then she's just waiting for Narcissus to say things so she can echo things back to him. So she's waiting for Narcissus to speak, and then echoes back his last words, basically. And Narcissus hears something in the bushes, and he's like, "Who is that? If you're there, come out, be with me. Like come out and be with me." And she's like, "Be with me." She can sort of like express that one thing, but then she just has to wait again to see whatever he says. And then eventually he's freaked out by her, and he says like, "Go away," and she goes like, "Go away." All she can do is echo back that thing. And in a sense that also happens to Narcissus himself, because when he falls in love with the reflection, so this is also something of the twins and the reflector, the first reflector being Gemini. And even if you look at the symbol, it's like a mirror that you can sort of stare into. If you think of it as like it's the Roman numeral for 2, right? But in the middle of that is that mirroring process. And when Narcissus falls in love with his reflection, so he doesn't fall in love with his self, right? He doesn't know himself. That's his curse. So he falls in love with simply the reflection of himself. And then as his reflection is happy, he feels happy. But then suddenly he feels like, oh, something happens. Then he sees his reflection, feels a little bit off. And then he feels sad. And so then his reflection feels sad. It's like, why? Why are you sad? And then he feels angry. And now his reflection is angry. They have this big fight, him and his reflection, basically. which is also part of the echo complex or the Gemini complex, in a way of the, well, is it me or is it you, right? As the first of the mutable signs, it's the first to ask that. It's the siblings as well. It's like, wait, is this me or is this my sibling? Or even if you, or the element of the lost twin, the experience of like this gone, something's missing that's really vital, and I need to get it back. So this is the Gemini experience. It's the third sign of the zodiac. It's the it's the first time we get into the real complexity, because we've had the Mars ruled Aries and the Venus ruled Taurus, and those are kind of like are what they are in a sense, cardinal and then fixed. And then we have this mutability of Gemini. It's the third sign, but it's twin, so it's got two-ness to it and three-ness to it. And it's this, we start to enter the confusions of things, the confusions, so the fusion in between things. And so I like the echo sort of popped in, because that wasn't where we were going to go, but of course it does involve Zeus or Jupiter at its very beginning, because Zeus is Jupiter. It involves that side of Jupiter too, that side of Jupiterian consciousness that really doesn't get enough of an exploration when we think of Jupiter in our own charts. So we don't think of it, if we just think about it in terms of expansion, then we're thinking about it in terms of the king of the gods and this expansive force in the heavens, very sky fatherly. But then we're not. So then what are we missing when we're missing that? We're missing kind of like, the word enthusiasm. That's the Zeus in that is Zeus in that, right? It actually means like to be filled with the god. And so there's a Theo that's in there, but that also, you could also sort of hear it as in Zeusiasm, right? Like it's in Zeus that's in the middle of that. It's when we're filled with the element of God. So then we can, of course, get carried away by that. We can get so, because it is also the centaur that rules Sagittarius that Zeus is, or Jupiter is connected to, where we can get pulled away or carried away. And we know from Zeus's mythology that he gets carried away. In some ways, he's getting carried away right there. He's in a forest full of nymphs. He's getting pretty carried away, we can imagine. And as he's getting carried away, he gets met with this opposite force, which is Hera, always representing more Saturnian consciousness. Like that's not the right thing to do, and you'll be punished for that. And that's the thing that Zeus or Jupiter struggles with, is like, it wants to be part of all of creation. It wants to be generative. It wants to be in the flow of things. It wants to get carried away. I think of Jupiter as like, on the one hand, it wants to be in charge and have things under control. And on the other hand, it wants to be completely out of control. I think that's the complexity of Jupiter. So if you're then taking that into where it is in your chart, you may see like, what in this is me wanting to be in control and me wanting to be out of control. And that can be a really good start. And what we talking about today was, if Jupiter's in Gemini, then who is Zeus's lost twin? As part of what Melanie and I talked about, what is it to have, could an archetype have a lost twin? That's a good way to sort of ponder that. And I guess the last thing I'll say as I go with my final bit of echo before her voice goes, saying a lot of things, right? This is kind of the thing. So one thing Melanie said to me in a reading that she did for me, like, 15 years ago or something. I don't know, it was about 2011 or something. She was looking at Jupiter in my chart, and she said to me, Jupiter was generally considered a benefic, in the sense that he was good luck and good fortune, and wherever Jupiter was, there was this expansive process, and often good things would come along with that. Like, you reap the benefits of Jupiter kind of crossing over a particular thing or showing up in a particular part. But she said there was one curse that he put on the humans. I've never been able to find this in the mythology since, but Gemini, Melanie, to sort of like pull things from some other dimension sometimes and be like, wow, okay. So the curse that he had for the humans was something that I think she called it ape, ape, ape. And with this curse, it's a state of paralysis brought on by too many options.
Wow.
So that is the Jupiter curse as well. So hopefully that gives us a sense, like we've already got paths to take today that involve elements of Jupiter that you may not have thought about before, or some that you have thought about before, but then pulling it into also other components of this energy and this force.
Yeah. Is that, I have a thought, but is that, are you
That's it. That's
there?
my whole monologue, starting from Echo and finishing with Arpe.
Awesome. Um, yeah, so even just to slow this down a little bit for me and for people listening and for all of us, I'm thinking of in the astrology course that I'm teaching that you are also teaching in.
Yeah.
This month we're starting on Gemini, the month of Gemini, not surprisingly, because the sun also happens to be in the sign of Gemini right now, and we're doing Gemini and Mercury, etc. So I just met with the class, and we were feeling into the energetic of the season of Gemini, right? So we've done Pisces, Aries, Taurus, and when we're feeling into Gemini, I loved, there was an image that one of the people brought up of at this time of year, so Aries being the energy of like the seed of something or the brand new spark, right? Taurus
Mm,
being the energy of that seed coming into a shoot and starting to take hold, but still being pretty focused on survival and just, am I even
mm,
gonna make it into growing into an actual plant and all of that? But then the Gemini energy, my favorite, I don't want to say favorite. Anyway, I loved this particular image that someone brought up of at this time of year, um, for example, babies coming out of where they've been born for the first time and exploring, and exploring they're not just the teeny tiny infant and they're not even just getting their legs under them. Now they're actually a little bit bigger, tiny bit bigger, and they're out exploring the sunshine for the first time and curious, just looking all around. And
mm,
as you're talking, something that's striking me for the first time ever is this element of Gemini being sort of a mini version almost of Libra, where it's the first time we're now sort of old enough or big enough to even notice something other than me, other than my own survival moment. Oh yeah, now there's this thing and that thing, and I get to explore this thing, and here's my reflection, and here's right, all of that. Um, so I just wanted to kind of contextualize the developmental stage of what Gemini, I
mm,
think, is, because that helps me in my own body to start to feel into, okay, then what does that mean when we have Jupiter entering this sign of
mm,
Gemini? And like I said earlier, Gemini is, I don't have any planets in Gemini personally, and it's just not an energy I've understood naturally. It's taken time. And I feel like
mm,
even listening to you talk about it and your podcast and everything, your conversations with Melanie, various conversations I've had with Melanie have helped me explore Gemini much more.
mm.
Um, but yeah, I love this, that Gemini is a reflector in lots of ways, and it's the first
Yeah.
time there's an other of some kind, a twin or
Yeah.
a
Of some
sibling or
kind.
a something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can carry on from what you're saying there to bring in Hermes in his, just a snippet of Hermes here, because in some ways Hermes is he skips the Aries and Taurus parts,
Mm.
and he just is born Gemini, right?
Mm.
So he's first moment of his birth, he's like, oh, I don't really like this crib. This feels like a prison. So breaks the lock and breaks out, right? Like, so this first move is to break out of prison. He's like, this is prison. I'm out. His second move is to break out of the cave that he's in, which is Maia's cave. So so he's in the home of the mother. He's like, this won't do. I'm out. So he he spends a lot of time though at the threshold, which is where Gemini tends to spend time, where Hermes tends to spend time at the threshold. So you'll find with this particular energy of Gemini that you're at a crossroads. And so imagine that we're in where we have Jupiter in Gemini, we've got an expansion of the crossroads. We've got more crossroads than we would normally kind of consider. And that's collectively and individually. And we're standing there going, the Greeks had the image of the three-road crossroad. One is coming up, and then there's two shoots off of it. I like that
Wow.
better than the four-road crossroad because it's like you've just come from somewhere and you've got two choices. That's very, that to me feels very Gemini. So he spends time at this threshold, and at the threshold, he meets a tortoise, and it's the funniest thing he's ever seen in his life because he's like, what is a turtle doing like this far away from the ocean? It's crazy. It's just so somehow he knows about turtles. Somehow he sort of barely knows about tortoises, right? But this
Hmm.
this concept of this thing is like, oh my God, what are you doing here? That is so entertaining. So he's able to look out in the world and rather than see like all big scary things, dangerous things are out here, he just looks out and whatever he sees is like, oh my God, how entertaining is this? How fun. How
Wow.
fun that a turtle is out here in the mountains. How ridiculous is that? So he's an absurdist from the very start, right?
Hmm.
He's like, that is absurd, this turtle. It's really a tortoise. He's like, weird. But then he's also making a symbolic comment on the next sign along of Cancer, which is a crab or used to be a tortoise or a turtle, the one who carries its home on his back.
Mhm.
And I guess to Hermes, he's like, he doesn't get it, doesn't get it. Like, why carry things around like that? It's not his style to carry things around, really. It's his style to innovate and to change things and to assume that as he goes on his path, everything that he needs is going to be there, which is very
Hmm.
different than the Cancer energy that's going to come after him, which is like nesting and getting everything set and making sure your home is really safe and everything. He's got no interest in safety, actually.
Hmm.
He's like, I'm
Hmm.
totally safe because I am Hermes, and so I'm going to walk out in this world, and whatever I find is going to be fine, right?
Well, and he kind of is, right? I mean, he can go to the
Yeah,
underworld and come back and he's fine and
it's
yeah.
fine. Yeah, he operates in a state of total okayness with everything that happens. And I
Huh.
think that's when I think about the real gift of Gemini. It's like, you know what? All of this is totally okay, actually.
Hmm.
I don't need feelings of shame. I don't need this heavy weight. I just need to be in touch with the thing that's going on around me. And so when he sees the tortoise, he's like, amazing. He doesn't just see it though, he sees through it. And
Ah.
that's another hermetic thing to see through. So when he sees the tortoise, he instantly knows that that's not just the tortoise, there's something else.
Hmm.
And so he lures the tortoise in. And this is really interesting. This is where you get a little bit the dark side of the trickster.
Hmm.
But he tells the tortoise this is a very dangerous place, this world. Anything could happen to you out here. You should come in to my cave where it's safe. And as soon as he gets into the cave, he turns it around and kills it.
Oh.
I told you it was dark. I told you there was
Uh-oh.
something. I told
Why
you.
did he do that?
But then scoops out the shell, uses some strings. I don't know how he gets those strings, and then creates the world's first musical instrument called the lyre, Lyre, plays the world's first song. And it's like, as he's playing the music, everything around him, all of nature starts to hush and listen. And, everything around is like, whoa, they've never heard something so beautiful and so profound. He's singing
Hmm.
a full hymn just like making it up on the spot. It's just like ding, 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 ding. And he's thinking all the way back to creation, the start of creation. But Hermes doesn't sing about Uranus and Gaia and all this war, all that stuff and all the violence and things. He goes back to Mnemosyne, whose name means cellular memory, and she's the mother of the nine muses.
Hmm.
So he starts to sing of this. And then once he's sung of the muses, you know, the muses are these 9 sisters that are about, you know, like there's the muse of astronomy, astrology, and there's the muse of tragic poetry, and you know, these muses that come through to inspire the humans, you know, and that's ultimately what he's there to do, right? He's there to inspire the humans. And as he's singing this whole myth, he thinks like I should also sing about the creation of Hermes, because that was the most beautiful, amazing thing. So he sings about, you know, Maia, his mother, and Zeus, his father.
His father. Hmm.
His father. So Jupiter is Mercury's father. Let's put it that way. Or in Greek language, Zeus is Hermes's father. And he sings of the connection of his own parents. You know, let's have
Wow.
a think about that. You know,
Mm,
who of us humans would want to even think about our parents getting
yeah.
together? Gross, right? Taboo. He doesn't have a sense of the taboo. He just thinks it's this glorious moment. He doesn't mention that Zeus is being, you know, he's in his infidelity thing with his mother. He just thinks about like how beautiful his mother was and how Zeus was such a like, you know, such a warm, loving partner, and they were making love for days and days. And the result of that being Hermes,
The best thing ever
the best thing
himself.
ever. Then I'm here. And how good is that? Right? Like, how good is it that now I'm here? Because that's the greatest.
So funny.
You know, and then think about that. Like he's dealing with the tortoise, with music, with home. And when he leaves home, he goes and steals Apollo, his twin brother, not his twin brother, his big brother, the sun god Apollo. He steals his 50 cows. So isn't he in between? Isn't he very Gemini here, sitting in between Taurus and Cancer, and ultimately
Mm,
going like, Cancer's too heavy, too emotional, too
mm.
much bonding going on there. I don't really like this whole mother bond home cave thing. You know, I'm not really digging on that. And then he's like, cows, cattle, wealth. I'll just take that actually. So he becomes the thief then. It's like, actually, I'm just going to take that. So he's like disrupting the home of Cancer on the one side, and the stability and security of Taurus and those cows on the other.
Mm,
He's mixing it up. He's you know,
mm.
like there's the world's rules, and then there's Hermes's rules. And actually, I'm going to just do it this way and feel really good about that.
Mm.
But it's obviously causing a lot of trouble. You've already seen in just this little part of the story how many sides of Gemini there are, you know, because there is. We the Greeks weren't afraid to explore the dark and twisted side as well, because it is dark and twisted. He does lure the tortoise in, you know. When I was first working with this story, I would often edit that out
Mm.
in my own psyche. I would say like, so he saw the tortoise and then he created music out of it. See what I did
Mhm.
there? You know,
Mhm.
like, no, he lures it in. He tells it that it's safe. It's safer in here than it is in the world. So he lies to him. Tortoise was just fine. Thank you very much. The only thing that Tortoise did wrong was to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. He did not. But then we can also see, okay, that's evil and twisted and very dark trickster. And at the same time, the result of it was the gift of music,
Mm.
you know. But by the time he's played all that music, by the way, he throws it in his crib. He's like, boring.
In the world. Can I ask you a question?
Yes, please.
So, I mean, so this whole description, right, is, um, he sounds irreverent. He sounds kind of, I don't know. What I'm basically wondering is, so how do you take all that and make meaning out of it? Or what good is in this sort of, I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to mix things up. I can imagine, I can come up with my own ideas, but I'm wondering for you, what's the good?
I think I think what Hermes is actually, and therefore we're exploring Gemini, and therefore we're exploring Jupiter in Gemini, right? So
Mhm.
just to sort of keep track of where we're going.
just point out that
Um,
as you are recording this right this minute, Mercury is to be at 2920 Taurus. So next what, like
mm,
day or something, Mercury will also be in Gemini, and the sun, and is Venus. I think Venus is conjunct the sun in Gemini, and
yeah,
etc. On and on. So yes,
right.
keep going.
Which is interesting, right? It's 29 degrees of Taurus. So in some ways that is Mercury stealing these cattle,
The
right? Yeah.
tortoise. Well, oh
Well,
no, got it. Okay, yes,
the
the other one.
cows, the
The other
cows,
one,
the
the
other one.
cows.
Yeah. He'll later go and disrupt the home
Mm,
life. Um,
mm.
okay, what good is in this? Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the thing, right? Um, you bring up irreverence, and I think that is really a key word because in order to understand Gemini consciousness and Mercury consciousness and Hermetic consciousness, we have to take in the fact that he's irreverent on the one hand, and then he has a deep reverence on the other.
Mm.
So, so the trick, what Gemini has to reckon with, actually, is where to be irreverent, what deserves your irreverence, and what deserves your reverence. And if those two get twisted, that's where it can start to, like, it's a deconstruction position, right? It's deconstructing things, and Hermes is already within a few hours of being born, deconstructed the world around him.
Mm.
But later you need to read the whole myth all together as one whole thing, because later you get the sense that, like, it seemed like he was just doing a bunch of random things, but everything that happens in this story eventually comes back around. And not only that, it's been transformed for the better,
Mm.
um, all the way through. So his irreverence was actually because, like, like he's a god, he shouldn't be born in this cave, right? The creation of music was to eventually give to Apollo to bargain with him, which gives him his powers by trading the music with Apollo. Apollo is the music god because Hermes invented the music and then gave it to Apollo. He doesn't even exchange, he gives it to him. And then
Mm.
Apollo feels so amazing about that that he just gives him the cows.
Mm.
So then you can look in the wholeness of the context, on the context of the whole story, and say, like, he stole his own cows. They were always his cows. It's just that that wasn't visible to everybody at the beginning, that they were his cows. It questions things of property, it questions things of gifting, it questions things of exchange. Later on, he sacrifices two of those cows, which is a pretty mean feat for somebody that's only a few hours old. So he has to lift the cow up and turn it on its back. The whole thing is like some superhuman strength. And when he does that, he does it meticulously. And he does it to the 12 gods, and he does it perfectly. And he's incredibly reverent. Remember that of the 12 gods, Hermes and Apollo and Jupiter are in there, right? So, and Zeus, right? So he's actually doing this very reverent maneuver towards the gods, including himself, which I love. This is the thing about Hermes that I love. And Apollo, whose cows he's just stolen. He doesn't take Apollo slice and go and actually go forget about Apollo, or because this is me, I won't include myself. He's like, no, there's 12 gods and goddesses, and I have to honor them equally. And he lays out, he cooks. This is the thing it says at the beginning of the story, that he's very hungry specifically for meat. And the smell of the meat is so delicious, he starts to salivate, but he doesn't eat any. So that's interesting too, right? You'd think if he was just a purely instinct-driven trickster, then he would have just devoured everything. Like Monkey in the Chinese tradition, Monkey King is asked to look after the peaches of immortality. There's these trees where all these peaches of immortality are. And by the time they come back in the morning, he's gouged himself on the peaches. So there's just like peach pits everywhere, because he represents an earlier version of trickster mentality, which is monkey.
Mm.
And the monkey is just going off of like everything that it wants and it's just grabbing it. But Hermes
More
is obviously a step out from there
more
because
like
he's,
Aries-ish.
Yeah, more like Aries-ish, exactly. You
Mm.
know, like just go, or maybe even Shadow Taurus we could see,
Hmm.
just kind of
Hmm.
like can't get enough kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's not Hermes. He's actually he's he is a trickster. He is doing all of the tricky things, but he's not actually doing it purely out of self-interest. He's got some other thing going on. Like he just gave a gift to humanity of music, but he doesn't make a big deal out of it. He tosses it away. He's reorganizing things here. When he gets home after all of this stuff, his mother chastises him, and he goes straight back at her. It's like, "What's your plan for getting us out of this cave, then? Huh? What do you have? By the end of tomorrow, we won't be in this cave. We'll be at the banquet halls where we should be. But I don't know what plan you have. Just stay in this cave and like be all kind of humble about it. No, I'm not staying here, and you're not either. So, I mean, how's that to talk across boundaries, to talk across the mother-son thing, to talk across power, to talk across dynamics? Just doesn't even, it's like he doesn't even see that as a power dynamic. Or he actually has reverence for his mother, but his way of showing that is to be the trickster and get her out of her situation and get her up into the banquet halls.
Mm.
He's a very confusing figure in the sense that if you want to find some kind of a moral compass, forget about it. That's not how you're gonna ever understand Hermes. But then if you think of what he's bringing, how he really does love and care for the humans, unlike many of the gods, because he's a step down transformer, and that's part of Gemini too. Gemini is trying to bring the big information. So this is very Jupiter in Gemini. Bring the
Yes.
big information and step it down into understandable terms
Yes.
that people can relate to. That's Hermes wants to do that. He's like, see, he doesn't want Apollo to have all those cattle, right? He's like, I want to give all of the, I want to redistribute all of this.
Mm.
I don't want these powerful things to have this much power.
Like a Robin Hood.
He's a bit of a Robin Hood, and Robin Hood is of the Hermetic. He's a
Mm.
Hermetic figure,
Mm.
someone
Mm.
who can, benevolent thieves,
Mm.
right? And so it leaves us with like, wait, is he just a thief, or is he out for himself? And he's certainly out for himself. But as he goes out for himself, he also has this incredible help and assistance to all the others. And like this will bring us back to the Jupiter thing, and then I'll be quiet and let all of these images simmer. Um, Apollo obviously is like, "Where's my cattle?" And then he asks to see an omen of where the cattle is, and he asks for an omen, and an eagle flies over. He's like, Zeus. So, oh, Zeus has just had a new Zeus just had a new son, didn't he? Mm,
Ah.
Hermes. Okay, that's my little brother. And so he goes, marches straight to Hermes, opens the door, speaks first to Hermes' mother, Maia. He goes like, your son, you know, who's already chastised him as soon as he came home, like at just before dawn, after causing all sorts of ruckus and trouble and completely filthy with blood and mud all over him and everything. And that's when he got chastised the first time. Now Big Brother comes in, the sun god, Big Brother, not just any Big Brother, right? The sun god. So he's all
Mm.
about order and structure and all of these kinds of things, civilization, everybody doing the right thing. So this is the exact opposite energy to him. He doesn't like it at all. And chastises him. He's going, what have you done? Where are my cows? Just like chastises him, and he's like, I don't even know what you're talking about. I don't even know what cows are yet. I'm like, was born yesterday.
I'm so
I think,
innocent.
yeah, I'm so innocent. My mama maybe drew me a cow. Is that the same thing as what you're talking about? But I don't know. All I
Mm.
really care about is mother's milk and swaddling.
Mhm.
And he goes like, oh my God, you are just the worst. So he grabs him by the feet and he takes him up to Mount Olympus. Hermes farts in his face.
No, that's part of the story?
That's part of the story. I think they refer to it as a horrible omen or something. And he drops him and he goes, oh my God, okay. Oh, Jesus Christ, this guy. And he's like, what? I'm a baby. It's what babies do. You expect a baby not to fart? So he takes him up and puts him in front of his dad, Zeus. You know, this is that Zeus. This is the Zeus that you would see in the Zeus is Jupiter, and we see the big throne, big scepter, legs like really solid, big stance, kind of this energy, right? He brings it into the judge Zeus, the big father Zeus. Pretty intimidating force, pretty much the most intimidating force you're going to meet in existence at the time. And he lays him down there and he goes like, this is your son, Hermes, your new son. Let me tell you what he's done in his first day of being alive.
Already.
Already.
Mhm.
Zeus goes like, okay, Apollo, okay, I get you. And looks at his son Hermes. Pretty like with the fierceness, you know, that only you can see it in the statues of Zeus. Like that would be a pretty full on and intimidating force. What have you got to say for yourself? And Hermes looks around and then he starts telling him, I don't know what you're talking about. I
No.
was born yesterday. I only care for mother's milk and swaddling. I wish all of the cows in the world would just die because they've seemed to cause me so much trouble and I've never even seen one. Why are all these cows out to get me? You know, like creates this big story. And as he's telling the story, he gives Zeus this little wink. And Zeus
Wow.
is like, oh my God. And then he just can't help but laugh.
Mm.
He does this big jovial, you know, this is jovial is the word comes from Jupiter, right?
Mhm.
Jovial is another energy of Jupiter. And he just starts laughing and laughing. Big belly laughs, you know, the whole world is thundering with his laughter.
Mhm.
Apollo obviously is like, this is not going the way that I hoped it would go. You know, I was hoping that he would chastise him. But Jupiter instead turns to his two sons, or Zeus turns to his two sons, and he's like, listen, the world needs Apollo, but the world also needs Hermes.
Mm.
You know, you're both my children. And I'm not gonna get in the way of this because there's something that you guys have to do here.
Wow.
But then he turns to Hermes and goes, listen, this is all over now. So you take your brother and you show him where the cows are and you give him back his cows, you know, and we go from there. And Hermes goes, got it. So at that point, he's not irreverent again, right? He now is
Mm.
like, okay. And he does exactly that. He takes Apollo all the way, you know, takes him over and shows him where the cows are. So this is the kind of father that archetypally, the kind of father energy that Jupiter represents is like he looks at his sons. He's not trying to make his sons little mini Jupiters, you know. Like he's
Mm.
got no interest in that actually. What he's interested in is can his creations be as diverse and as interesting and as multifaceted as they can? Because he knows that the more multifaceted and diverse and interesting the world is, the
Mm.
more creative it gets and the more you know the more lively it is. And he's all about that. He wants creation to be quite fun and interesting and you know entertaining and sure dramatic as well and tragic as well. And he wants it to be everything. And so that's very Jupiter in Gemini then, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And his
Exactly.
relationship to his son Hermes, he loves him.
Mm.
You know, you can imagine in another tradition or if it was more Saturn or something, that would play out as a chastising and as a punishment. You know, in the Norse tradition, they punish Loki for being
Mm.
the for being too tricky, you
Right.
know, for going one step too far. That's not Hermes' story,
Mm.
actually. He doesn't ever go one step too far. And you may not see it, right? Like you as in us, we may look at his story and go like, oh, that's not cool, man. Like don't lure in that poor innocent tortoise who's just gone about his day and his business and kill it. And, you know, don't kill those two cattle and, you know, those two cows. And don't, we want him to not do these things. But then
Mm.
it's okay. Well, then trade, then have one tortoise in the world that's still alive and I'll take back music. Would you take that? I wouldn't. Right? Like he puts an exchange down for us. That's why he's the king of the liminal space and the king of the crossroads. He says, like, well, which one
Mhm.
do you want?
Mhm.
And we have to make a choice. And that's why there's always the story of meeting the devil at the crossroads. Well, before you met the devil at the crossroads, it was Hermes there.
Mhm.
And Hermes has got a bargain for you. And you
Well, and
have to
it,
make the choice.
mhm. And I think of Mercury as being the bridge between worlds, and how we do have to bridge. Certain things do have to die in order to birth other things, and there needs to be a bridge to bring those together and to bring the death into the life. And
That's
um
it, yeah. And he
mm,
doesn't have any shame around that. So that's what he
mm,
really, unlike humans who operate with high levels and high degrees of shame and consequence and worry and, have I been the wrong person? And, sort of like, but he doesn't. He operates with like, this is all as it should be, and I'm working with it. So he doesn't
mm,
have he never has a thing about eating meat, because he's like, yeah, that's also part of this, where there's got to be death, and then there's got to be, out of that death gives life to other things, and that's the way that it is. He doesn't get hung up on any of those things. So I think as a
mm,
as a psychological being, Hermes is he kind of rules over psychotherapy and things in a way, like he's that's part of the Hermetic, where we're asking questions, we're going in, we're mirroring back and all those kinds of things. There's also part of going back to echo, there's part of psychotherapy that's also echo, that is to echo back what someone says so they can hear it. And then you can also have echo chambers and, like all of this kind of stuff. It's all in the world of Hermes, for better and worse, for better and worse. And I think you can see plenty of this energy arising and working through the collective. And like the thing is with Jupiter in Gemini, expect more of that for the next year.
mm,
Expect more crossroads, expect more trickster energy, like a little bit more disruption.
mm.
Expect it.
Well, and I'll bring this in, and not as an expectation that anybody should anything, but just to throw this in because thinking of it, I was telling you before we started recording that one of my cats died this week. It was not a fun experience, terrible, but what I'm thinking of as you're talking is actually on the morning when I knew she was going to have to be put to sleep, I was praying on it and I was feeling terrible, absolutely terrible. And in my praying, what she actually showed me, or what I saw in my prayers, was she I had this image of her outside rolling around in the grass playing, and she said, "It's fine. I live and I die and I live and I die. It's all part of playing for me. My
Mm,
spirit comes and lives and dies, and I it's so what she was saying to me was, let me go. Please let me go so I can keep playing."
mm,
Right, because long
beautiful.
story short, basically she got very, very sick very fast, and she all of a sudden couldn't use her front paws at all. So she couldn't move, she couldn't walk. She went into kidney failure. It was, very fast. Um, but she couldn't play, literally, physically, she couldn't. And I could see it in her eyes. I mean, she was feeling really bad, but I could feel it. And my 17-year-old actually said, I think the big thing is she wants to go outside and play. And I
Mm.
could, she gave me the stare like, mm, come on. um anyway, so it's like a really sobering, very sad example, but it's coming up as you're talking. So yeah.
Yeah, well, that's it. So, the threshold can be many things, can't it? And one of the great thresholds is the life death
Mhm.
portal, and Hermes is about portals. The word opportunity has port in it, or portal. And he does provide us with all these opportunities. And that's the other thing about Jupiter in Gemini. It's like, okay, lots of opportunities are going to arise in this time. You can imagine for those places in your chart that have Gemini, that's going to be an arena that is growing with opportunities. And You know, that was a personification of the god Kairos in Greece, who was different to Kronos. So it's a different form of time.
Mm,
Kronos is more Saturn, rules this, then that time, you know, chronological. And Kairos means the opportune moment arises. And you know, I was just learning about this with Brian Clark, and the front. This character has like a big hair, like this big waving hair coming out of the front, and then bald at the back. So if you don't grab the front part of the hair, you just slip off the back and it's gone.
wow.
And this is also Hermes, you know, and there's consciousness. So on the one hand, there's all these beautiful things, but there's also, as you say, sometimes you're at the threshold between life and death, like the cat there. And
Mm,
there's a sense of, I've got to go now. You know, cats when it's time to die will just wander off and be by themselves, and just see that through, you know,
mm,
just move into that. And I think again, Hermes is bridging, but he's bridging our instinctive natures with our conscious natures. And I think that's something that really his big gift is that for us, amongst
mm,
many other big gifts, you know, because he really does care for the humans. You know, that's why he is the psychopomp, and he'll lead you to many different places, but one place he can lead you is to the underworld. So he can guide you down to the underworld. He can also guide you to Hestia, which is the
mm.
you know, the hearth. So
Yeah.
he guides you back home. And so you think, oh, I can trust Hermes. Well, yes and no is the answer to that. And it will always be the answer to that, because his role is to lead you, but sometimes he can lead you on. And there's not really a rhyme or reason necessarily that you can see when you've been led on, when you've been had, right? When someone sold you the Brooklyn Bridge, it's
Mm,
kind of like, well, that's Hermes too, you know? So then you have to say, well, why would I follow him then if he's potentially just going to trick me? And Hermes like, up to you, dude. Up to you if you want to follow me, actually. So he's in that beautiful ambiguity, you know. If you don't follow Hermes when he's trying to take you somewhere, that's a risk. And if you do follow him, that's a risk.
mm,
He's never going to take away the gambling component of life. Never, ever. You take one road and the other one has to die. And so that's why the word decision has the word scission in it, like side, like suicide, homicide, genocide, and decide is a death. And so there's these moments. So yeah, I guess we bring into the space your cat, and we bring into the space the transition, um, and the idea that it wants to play. Please let me play, because knowing that death is that ultimate transition. You know, going down to the underworld, and just like all things that go down to the underworld, it gets reborn at some point. And so the cat is thinking like, not this. I don't want to be like this. I don't want to
no.
be having this thing where I can't play, I can't be outside, I can't be, you know, in the enjoyment. So let's just call this one.
Mm, yeah. One other thing coming up for me as you're saying the Mercury stuff is I think of my own Mercury in Pisces, and I think about how people often say, you know, you have Mercury in Pisces, oh, that's bad or whatever. It's a bad placement of a Mercury. And
Yeah.
I absolutely love my Mercury in Pisces, and my Mercury rules my ascendant and my moon, right? And in
Mm,
Virgo, so I have a very, very, very strong Mercury, I would say. And I one of the things that I love about my Mercury placement is actually that I feel like I can cross worlds and because my Mercury is in Pisces, but in my sixth house. So it's like I have all this
mm,
Virgo, Pisces combo stuff all over my chart. And and I feel like I can be kind of in a sense, I want to say irreverent, not in the sense of harming anything, not like I don't care, but more like okay, that rule is dumb. I'm not going to do it that way.
Mm,
Why would I do it that way? No, and I do also have very strong Uranus in my chart. And I currently have Uranus sitting precisely today to the degree on my Jupiter in my ninth house. Okay, so I have like lots of Uranian energies happening for me, which is
mm,
probably accenting that feeling. But I love bringing in this, that when people talk about the Mercury placement in a chart, it's like the traditional way of thinking of a Mercury placement seems to lean on the assumption that a Mercury function needs to be about logic and step
mm.
by step moving through life in a, you know, 1 + 2 + 3 way. But the way you're describing it is like, wait a second, no.
No,
No, no, no. Can be actually exactly what Mercury needs to do to like, well, we need to find our own way. Like what is that way? I don't
exactly.
know. Let's
Yeah, and
figure it
that's why
out.
I think Mercury is such a key to people's charts, actually.
Mm,
And then once you free yourself from that sort of post-enlightenment view of what the mind is, because that's all that is, it's just an overlay again,
yes.
then you're not considering that Hermes is a psychopomp, and
Mm,
that is Mercury.
mm.
And so maybe my Mercury is to guide, and maybe that Mercury is a guide. So, for instance, the
Wow.
Mercury in Pisces maybe is my guide, and it connects me to other spirits and sources, leads me to places, leads me back,
Totally. Sure does.
and gives you no guarantee that you'll get the right information there. Not his job,
Mm,
not my job to do that. Just to connect you,
yeah.
that's all I do.
Mm, mm,
And
mm,
that's what makes it such an interesting and intriguing energy. Because sometimes,
mm,
as we all know, we can be like really convinced of something, but
mhm.
Hermes has really just led us astray, and then told us all that stuff is true. It's real. It's
Mm,
real. It's like, yeah, okay. It's up to you to feel the trickster
yeah.
side of him and to say like, you're tricking me, aren't you? And he'll go like, yes.
Mm,
Once you call him out, he'll be like, yep. Anyway, we're really going over here. Let's go. It's like, okay, yes, I trust him this time.
mhm. Yeah.
It's not, he's a connector. And maybe it also tells us about the mind itself is a connector. It's more of a receiver than a transmitter, I think. But maybe that depends on where your Mercury is, whether it's more receiver or transmitter. Could be.
Yeah. I
But
experienced myself as
like,
a, yeah. I experienced
uh,
myself as a transmitter, literally, as a
yeah,
channel. But
yeah.
Mercury and Pisces, maybe, I
But
don't
a
know.
channel is also a receiver,
True, true.
receiving images. And that's why Mercury, the symbol, has those two antenna,
Yes.
so it is antenna. So what is thought? What is mind? Those are great questions that I think these symbols help us to see. Like our ideas just like floating around in the air, and then whoever has the better antenna picks them up and starts using them. And whoever is
Mm,
more hermetic takes that and turns it into their own thing.
mm.
But ultimately it doesn't belong to anybody.
Awesome. So we're already, I think, past the amount of time we wanted to
Well, we'll go like let's have another 10, shall we? Another 10
Okay,
minutes because we've
okay.
got a lot of Jupiter that we haven't
Yeah, exactly.
covered.
I was about to say. So, but then the whole Jupiter part, um,
Yeah.
I don't know where you want to go, but there's the Jupiter's lost twin, and there were lots of other components that we were maybe going to bring up. But you be the guide. Go for it.
I guess, we've got to think of what is Jupiter then. We just talked a lot about Mercury and Hermes. So the opposite energy of that, that mutable signs have only two rulers really traditionally. There's either Jupiter or Mercury. That's the four mutable signs. You have the two Jupiter ones, which is Pisces and Sagittarius, and you have the two Mercury ones, which is Gemini
Wow.
and Virgo.
I have never thought of it like that.
Yeah, so always,
Brilliant. Wow.
always you're going to have Jupiter opposite Mercury. Always.
Mm,
Wherever
mm, mm,
Jupiter is, it's going to be opposite Mercury. Wherever
mm,
Mercury is opposite Jupiter. So we know that they're talking about the two sides of the same thing.
mm.
And that's why when the Greeks connect the two and there's love there, it's very relieving because I think it's like, oh, this kid's in big trouble now. I certainly put an overlay of it of like what's going to happen now with this Zeus. But he's not. He's on the same page. He's just actually, and this is kind of instructive to this later on in the story, as Apollo and Hermes are trading, Hermes asks for prophecy. He's like, I want prophecy. I want to know what Zeus knows.
Hmm.
Now that's dangerous, because he is opposite. Mercury is opposite Jupiter. Its function is not to know. Its function is not to know, right? That's really
Yeah.
the key. Its function is to question, to ask, to, clarify with questions. So to get better and better questions. That's what Mercury is trying to do. That's what Gemini is trying to do. Now Jupiter is the knower. It knows things. So you've got to take those questions to Jupiter and then, challenge him, of course, and all these kinds of things. But then, so the Jupiter quality, so yeah, he asks prophecy, and Apollo says, no, you cannot have prophecy. It would be terribly dangerous in your hands. And he's like, yeah, fair enough. Kind of gets it. Like, yeah, I mean, it was an outlandish question,
Hmm.
but he does give him the bees. So he gives him these three sisters of the bees, and they give like little prophecies, signs, I would say, rather than omens. And
Wow.
that is the world of Mercury, signs. I think I might be going the wrong way. I think I should change direction here. It doesn't give you the whole picture, but it's like the lantern in Zen Buddhism that shows you two more steps, right? It's just
Fascinating.
enough. And
Hmm.
Zeus or Jupiter consciousness gives you the grand vision, which is why it rules Sagittarius on the one hand, the big thing that you're aiming after, and Pisces on the other, the even grander vision.
Yeah.
Now, it's not up to our little minds, our little hermetic Mercury minds, to understand that much of that thing. So, why is it then that when Jupiter is in Gemini, it's traditionally in its fall, which means that it's a pretty bad place for Jupiter to be? Because of exactly that. It's trying to understand everything with all of this little mind. It's like that's the confusion that's happening. It's the same as when Mercury is in Sagittarius, that's also in its fall, because that little mind is trying to understand the massive, massive questions. We kind of need to be a bit like Socrates was. Socrates said, show me the wisest people, or people that are known as the wisest. I'm going to just ask them a bunch of questions. And with my questions, I'll find out if they're truly wise or not, right? And lo and behold, every great thinker that he found, he asked all these series of questions, very Gemini of him, and eventually realized that they're not as wise as they said they were.
Hmm.
They asked and asked and asked and asked, and eventually he arrives at the oracle, and he says to the oracle, like, come on now, oracle, who's the wisest person? Because I really need to go to find the wisest person. And the oracle said, it's you, Socrates. And he said, no, he couldn't, like, but that's the movement, right? It's like there must be some, it's kind of like with Jupiter in Gemini, there must be something. I've got to ask these right questions. I've got to get my questions really clear. But then because it's Jupiter, it's so big and expansive and wide, it's going for the big thing. And so it can get us very stuck in a way where we're trying to, it's kind of like Echo's trying to say everything, right? But now she can't. Now she can only echo back. And that's to me like the flavor here of, especially in the new world that we're in, post internet and post all these sorts of changes in the way our communication works. It's been it's in some ways you can see that as the bigger picture. Jupiter in Gemini. What do you do when you go to Google or Chat GPT, ask questions?
Hmm.
It's the oracle. We created this massive oracle, right? This massive Jupiterian consciousness. And then we go in and we ask questions of it. So then we have to do what we did when we went to the oracle. We got to purify our questions. We got to get a sense of like, what do we really want to ask? And I think Jupiter in Gemini can be like, are we asking the right questions? Are we looking at the right things? Are we dismantling the right things? Are we irreverent in the right ways? Right? Are we, because if you twist the irreverence to things that you should be reverent to, that's the great disaster. Or opposite, if you're reverent towards the things you should be irreverent to, that's another great disaster. And that one thing describes a lot of human history. So, I think within that, Jupiter in Gemini, the other thing we wanted to discuss today was Jupiter's lost twin. And who would that be? And I think we've referenced it here of Zeus. Zeus is a twin energy, actually. We may not want to, astrologers may not want to see him that way, and we may want to stick with the one image of Zeus, but Zeus is a twin energy. He's got the element of him that is the ruler on Mount Olympus, overseeing everything. The eagle is his thing, so he's got this grand overview where he can see the whole thing, can see the whole thing. Now with this twin, the trap there is when the little mind tries to get into there and see the whole picture, it completely debilitates the self. Actually seeing the whole thing, this is why Apollo said us flat no, Hermes cannot have prophecy. Because if you could see the whole picture, you cannot act, which means you cannot act out your whole picture. So Hermes is like, I'm going to give you enough information. I'm going to give you 2 more steps. Trust me, that's all that you need.
Yeah.
And leave faith in the hands of Jupiter, right? That is a planet of faith. But if we do not want to have faith, or we cannot have faith, or faith has been injured for us or shut down or traumatized or whatever it is, if our faith is stuck, then we may get that little mind and we may go in and try to figure out the big questions. And that to me is one definition of anxiety.
Yeah.
Because you'll never figure that out. And even if you did figure it out, you'd be completely paralyzed as to what to do next if you could see the whole thing. So that's one side. And the other side, the lost twin side of Jupiter or Zeus, is it's the one that just keeps getting drawn into things again and again and again. This is enthusiasm, exuberance. This is the thing. It's like getting carried away by that horse. You just carried away, because, and that is like what Jason Holly would call the night world side of Zeus, that keeps getting pulled into the eroticism of life. It's just like too much to do here. It's too fascinating. It's amazing. I want to feel these feelings, right? I want to feel Jupiterian in my expansive sense of bliss, actually. I want to feel that. And so the way to feel that is I get drawn in like that bull, as we've looked at before, when he turns himself into a bull and gets drawn into the ocean with Europa on his back.
With arrows literally pulling the bull.
With arrows pulling the bull along.
Into the ocean.
Into the ocean. So we're trying to go into like, I want to experience everything, I just want to, I just want to taste everything, which we don't generally think of when we think of Zeus or Jupiter. We don't think of that part that is just sort of pulled towards things, that gravity, that big gas giant that's there. It's pulling towards itself, all those moons, and it's also so pulled in. So like, yeah, so it's pull as in the gravity of it, the levity of it, the joy, the excitement, the exuberance, the enthusiasm. And in that lost twin, completely out of control in every way that you can imagine being out of control. No metaphor there, just out of control.
And that seems to link
and there's something of Zeus consciousness. Yeah.
That seems to link to what you mentioned about Melanie with the curse, the potential curse of Jupiter.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So imagine this planet that wants to feel both of those things and knows how to feel both of those things, completely in control, getting that Sagittarian style eagle eye view, seeing the whole of the context of everything, seeing how everything's going to play out, being happy with that. So I will sit here on my throne as the king of the gods, and that's how that is. And being in charge and be the big leader, the one that people turn to, big father energy. and then equally pulled into an equal opposite desire to be swayed, pulled, seduced by the world, and feel therefore completely, this is all out of my hands. And the relief of that, that this is all out of my hands. I can't do it. And this world is much more powerful than me.
Wow.
And it goes back to the idea that the Sky Fathers were born from the Earth Mothers. The Earth Mothers is first, and therefore more primal, and therefore more powerful energy. So always a Sky Father, which Zeus is one of them. Zeus is the third Sky Father. But really, to me, it's Uranus is the first Sky Father. Zeus is the lineage Sky Father after, even though Saturn is in between. I've always seen Saturn as like an Earth Father because he's shacked up with Gaia. So he's like, Gaia and Rhea, he does the service of the earth. But these Sky Fathers, they're trying to escape. On the one hand, they're trying to escape earthliness, but they're also completely drawn in by earthliness. So then maybe with Jupiter and Gemini, we can start to explore that over the course of the year. I'm sure we'll be given more sort of inspiration from the gods and inspiration from nature, inspiration from things and events in our lives that just like, rather than being like Hermes, give me prophecy. It's like, actually, I don't want to know. I don't want to know the whole game because that would take away the play. That would take away the unfolding that Hermes is trying to get us into. But we can be curious about these two sides of that particular energy, knowing that what we're talking about is an energy in nature, in human nature, in the universe. What is this part that wants to be in control, in charge of things, total leader, doing a great job on the throne and out of control?
Yeah. And actually, on the one hand, I can see how Jupiter and Gemini would be an energetic that would be a conflict, but at the same time, an energetic that would maybe help us bring balance.
Yeah.
And that there is this part of us that does want to know, that does want that big picture, that does want to feel transcendent in a sense. And yet at the same time, we're human and we ultimately really don't know. And it's important,
Yeah.
I think, for us to be in that dance, to not only do one or the other. And also, again, just back to the cat thing, there was this moment last night where I realized, oh wow, a big part of my own struggle with her dying was feeling, I realized I was feeling like I should be responsible for everything. And I was actually talking to my mom and she said, you're not responsible for everything. So it was kind of like the
Mm.
releasing back into the reality that I'm totally out of control. And that actually felt really, really good,
Yeah.
and that I can just be, I don't need to be God. I am
Yeah.
a child of, or I am part of life. I can just release into not knowing and not having the answers, not being in control. And that's actually very, very key to healthy living, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
Because sometimes you get drawn in also to those Jupiterian positions,
Yes.
and then it is important to, think it through and play that right and not just go out of control. There's no advice here. It's just exploring the archetypal qualities,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
But sometimes we can get the inflation, which is definitely something about Jupiter, the inflation to think like we're the manager of the universe.
Yeah.
And we have to be able to say, like, I'm really not. I'm
Yeah.
really
No.
not.
Hmm.
I'm just like everybody else. I have this little sliver of time that I'm alive, just like your cat. And in that time, I'm not going to figure out everything. I'm not going to be able to. But what maybe this can be sort of the finishing move here. The a seed that people might want to journal on is this that just sort of arose with Jupiter in Gemini. I know enough to know that, and then complete the sentence.
Mm.
I know enough to know that. Because I think where we can get caught is either knowing too little and then just running with it and getting carried away. That's one of the elements of Jupiter and Gemini that would be a danger. The other side of that, though, would be the paralysis of like, I don't know enough yet. So let me just keep
Right.
gathering information until I know enough. So what
Yeah.
do you know enough to know that, right? I know enough to
Yes.
know that this action is needed, or this thing is what I have to do, or these are the people I've got to collaborate with, or whatever it is, right? So that you're not stagnating that Gemini energy, which really does have to move. It really does. It can't be sitting around too long at that crossroads.
Yeah.
Otherwise, yeah, analysis paralysis, and it gets totally stuck.
Again, like having those next two steps, can see the next two steps I have. So I know enough to go here to
Yeah.
this
And I
breadcrumb
know that from
next.
there it's likely there, and then
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and that
Which
and
is,
that
yeah.
that is why we are going to have to awaken faith, whatever that
Mm,
means for us. But if we don't have, if you know, like it's not enough to say that the humans can figure it out. Obviously, we can't. You know, and I know that there's all sorts of things that have happened around religion in our lifetime, but it's like, where do we put our faith? Because it's an essential function of the human consciousness, and it's needed. It's needed to have it. So as that breaks down, then the faith gets lost and we'll be stuck. And this is another thing, you know, Ken Wilber talks about this in the twin. So that's very Gemini, in the twin dangers of nihilism on the one hand and narcissism on the other.
mm,
That's if faith breaks down, right? I'll either big up myself or destroy myself. You know, so everything becomes about me then. If I can't have faith in anything else, that's terrifying. Or I don't have faith in anything, so everything is basically shit. That's nihilism. You know, those are the twin heads of that dragon, and there needs to be something beyond that we're paying attention to.
mhm. And I'll just throw in my one last thing that I think adds on to that, which is I'm thinking about just the archetype of the being the Jupiterian figure in the world, and how for a lot of us we are called to be the teacher or the leader or the one who knows things, right? And and something I'm feeling so strongly in my own work that I've talked about with you also, but I also see this need, I think, in the world, is that when we are in a position of imparting wisdom or knowledge, that it be done in such a not knowing way,
Mm,
um, and to be able to say, well, yeah, to be confident that I know enough to hold
mm,
space for whatever it is, XYZ in this moment. And yet I do it hopefully with humility that I am not the all knowing of everything. Right.
yeah,
I could be wrong. I'm learning as I'm going, et cetera, et cetera. But I also know enough to take this step and then that step. Um, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And it just reminds me that Jupiter's the first of the planets that is not personal.
Hmm.
Um, so it's something that you connect to. It's not something that you are. Um,
Aha.
Hermes might be more something that I am, but and I cannot be that Jupiter. I've got to connect to Jupiter in order to bring it through. And that may give me the sense of knowing, like I'm big into Gnosticism and that sense of really knowing. I'm big into that, but it's a humble, subtle knowing. And usually it means that you've got a connection to something greater. And that's ultimately what Jupiter is giving us. It says like, okay, you know all of that, and then I've got the thing that you're not going to know, but you're going to have to face out here in order to access it. And then you can
Beautiful.
use it. You can use it. But don't watch out for the hubris there of thinking that you are it and it is you.
Totally.
That's
Yeah.
Hermes' great question. Can I have prophecy? No.
No.
You can have these
Yeah.
bees. They'll tell you about the next couple of steps.
Yeah, exactly. Which is interestingly, when I pray, that's exactly how my guides show me. They're like they'll sometimes give me a big kind of picture view, but usually it's just enough to get me to tomorrow or next month,
Mm,
and then I'm like, okay, but what about next year? Like, shh, not time.
no,
Yeah, we'll tell you when it's time. Just
exactly.
calm down. It's fine. It's all good. All right. Well, we could go on, but
We
we're
could, of
going to.
course. Well, it's Jupiter, isn't it? So we will stop.
Yeah. Wonderful. Okay. So maybe can I just ask you this question to close? What would be your one wish for this year? We now have a year ahead of Jupiter is now in Gemini, and it's going to be in Gemini until, I mean, basically for exactly a year. Um, what would be the wish you would want to put out into this coming year of Jupiter traveling through the sign?
Hmm. I guess what just sprung up in your just then as I was pondering was the restoration of the right kind of reverence. It's a lot of
Mm,
R's, but the restoration of the right kind of reverence, because I think there's a lot of irreverence in the world, and I'm entertained by irreverence as anybody is. I like it. And I'm a big supporter of comedians and I want people to say offensive things. I think that's important, but then where does our reverence go? And I think maybe we can, as the humans, while Jupiter's hanging out down here in Gemini, we can we can feel like where does that go? Particularly in terms of Sky Father energy, right? Because I can easily feel the reverence for Mother Nature. And so
mm,
therefore for Earth Mother, that's very easy. But I want to also feel reverence for the Sky Father. Um,
mm, mm,
maybe that connects to the stars and to elements of being, looked after, protected, loved.
mm. Beautiful. And I'll
Yeah, I
just
think
add
that
in,
would be it.
yeah,
Yeah.
great. So I'll add in there when you're talking about that um, I did a new moon video uh, where for the new moon in Gemini, because the new moon in Gemini is going to be very close to Aldebaran, which is at 10 degrees of Gemini. So I'm thinking about that as uh, Jupiter is moving through Gemini, it's going to be crossing Aldebaran, and Aldebaran, among other things, it's one of the royal stars and it's associated with integrity. So
Mm.
that links for me to this whole, well, where do we need to be reverent? For me, it's also
Yeah.
about integrity and finding that Mercury or Hermes in and of itself and Gemini in and of itself might give us lots of options, might give us lots of avenues we can go down, but it's really our own inner compass that's going to
Mm.
know, like our North Star, or our sense of what is actually our value set and all of that. And so, yeah, so I'm just noticing that Jupiter will be in that energetic of Aldebaran,
Mm.
the eye of the bull, in the constellation of Taurus. And yeah, so that's another, just to bring that
Yeah,
connection
I
in
like
there.
that.
Hmm. All right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah. Love it. So find Chris at his website on the soul's terms. And you're,
Yeah.
I'll just say, if anybody hasn't seen Chris's podcast, I absolutely, highly, highly recommend it. I love the episode on Gemini that you did a year ago. I love the two-part
Mm.
interview you did with Melanie in your month on Gemini. There's it's like a treasure trove, and you're about to start up a new wave with
Yeah,
it.
I'm getting ready
Yeah.
to start again. Yeah, so that's coming soon. But yeah, definitely go back and listen to those ones. And yeah, the Melanie conversation is a great one to get some really juicy
Yeah.
Jupiter and Gemini info from, I would
Yeah.
say.
And I think even the year before you did an episode on Hermes, is that right? Which,
Yeah, I did an
yeah.
episode with Brian Clark on Hermes, which is
Mm,
also, yeah,
I want to
amazing.
go
So
back and
there's lots of stuff in there now. It's like there's a bit of a library.
yeah, it's anyway, highly recommend it. Everyone go look at it. I'll
Awesome.
put the link
Thank
here.
you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much as always, Chris. Really,
An
really good
honor,
to be
Martha.
with you.
Thanks a lot for having me on.
Of course. And everybody, please comment, share. We would love to hear your thoughts,
Yeah,
etc. Please join in.
absolutely. Yeah.
Gemini. Wonderful. Thank you.